So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode in our series of online workshops hosted by Digital HealthWorks. I'm very happy to be talking to you today with Pascal, and we're going to discuss what's right for you, IVDR or MDR. So just a quick reminder around these workshops, the idea is that we're able to have a casual, interactive conversation. So we're going to start off with a 15-minute presentation followed by 10 minutes of discussion at the end. So do feel free to post any questions you have in the chat or just unmute yourselves and join on video at the end and ask them directly. As a reminder, also, Digital HealthWorks is a commercialization agency. We bring digital health and medtech ventures to market in the US and Europe. We have a brilliant team of experts based out of Boston, Berlin, and Lisbon, and we focus on three core areas of our expertise, including regulatory affairs, market access, and sales. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Pascal. Pascal, it's all yours.
Yeah. Can you hear me well?
Perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm Pascal, my name. I originally having some technical and software development background and work in digital health for like roughly 10 years now. Like the first half was in an own startup doing smartphone-based hearing tests. That's also where I got to know more about regulatory and quality management work. And the second half, I'm now working on consulting of supporting companies, startups, spin-offs, small, medium enterprises regarding software medical devices, like either quality management system, technical documentation, or whatever is needed. So then let's just continue. So yeah, today the question was like, what kind of IVDR, MDR, and like, why are they two different? And like, what's the difference and how to choose which one it is? Maybe just some quick context, why that is important at all. I mean, like the first two, which are probably familiar or known, or maybe like just like one is the MDR medical device regulation under the number 2017-745, which is for medical devices in general. And then there's like the 2017-746, which is the in vitro diagnostic regulation, like the IVDR, which is for IVD medical devices. Difference we come to in a moment. So when at this stage in a medical device project, two words that you come across often is like qualification and classification. Like the first is about qualification is about the question like, is it a medical device? And if so, what? Like an IVD or not? And then classification is about the risk class, but this is like kind of comes after qualification. Like today is only about qualification. Like, is it a medical device? And if so, is it MDR or IVDR? And yeah, the very high level point why it's important is, I mean, that's just simply a different process. Like most notified bodies do MDR, but only a few. I mean, luckily by now it's a good handful that do IVDR as well. So like there are differences in that, of course, and just simply different notified bodies that you, that you have to work with. Some notified bodies offer both, though. So let's continue. So don't read this entire text. I mean, it's just on, since that's like the formal definition of a medical device under the MDR. So in case you come across this later, on that later, you can read it. But it's basically just like, yeah, what is a medical device? And yeah, anything that has typically like a clinical benefit, like for diagnosis or treatment of alleviation or disease or any kind of monitoring or treatment or diagnosis of an injury or disability. I mean, I'm just paraphrasing, I'm not reading that out all. So like kind of a product, which can be a software that is used within a for a medical purpose. There are some more details, but they don't matter too much here right now. Then that's just the continuation of the previous slide. And then when you come to what is an in vitro diagnostic medical device, so the first sentence here already is fairly important. Like it says, well, an IVD device is a medical device. And then it further specifies it. So in other words, like the first question is like that you need to ask, is it a medical device? And then the second question, is it an IVD? So an IVD, so like every IVD is a medical device, but not every IVD device, not every medical device is an IVD. So IVD, so to say, like something more specialized. And if you like, I mean, we have examples on the next page or next slide anyways. So like, I mean, very typical examples for medical devices like pacemaker, hearing aid, or scalpel. I mean, like they work directly on the patient or are being used on the patient. I mean, pacemaker is obviously implanted. A hearing aid is like worn either on or in the ear, and scalpel used during surgeries. And then IVD medical devices, on the other hand, like lab tests, or like, I mean, something that got a little more known over the last years, like home self-tests, like for COVID-19. And so like the traditional differentiation is mostly like IVD, like in vitro diagnostic, means like any specimen that was taken out of the human body and is being diagnosed outside of the human body, meaning in vitro, in comparison to in vivo. So like you take a specimen, you examine it, and whatever device you use for that, this is an IVD medical device. So, well, now based on that, you may wonder, like, well, why do then we even talk about it if the difference is so easy? Well, it's easy as long as you stay in more traditional devices. But once you get to software, which is one of our big focus areas, like well, it's not necessarily that clear, because I mean, software is typically not treating someone directly, but is processing any kind of input data, and for example, making treatment recommendations. And for that, I mean, it can include or consider any kind of data. I mean, it doesn't matter whether they come from an IVDR or a normal medical device. So, and I guess at that point, like that question was just fairly, it was just like generally unclear what to use here. And so like the MDCG, standing for Medical Device Coordination Group, which is like a expert group that the European Commission set up via the MDR, and they publish guidance documents like this 2019-11, where they interpret or give guidance, give recommendations for certain implementation questions of the MDR and IVDR, or topics in between. And the specific one here is about the qualification and classification of software medical devices that are either MDR or IVDR. And one of the flowcharts here is about how to decide whether it is the MDR or the IVDR. So meaning like before that, you already decided it is a medical device, but so that is also what this first step says, like medical device software according to the definition of this guidance. And so like meaning this guidance, meaning this MDCG document, and in a previous flowchart, you decided this is a medical device software. And then you go into first step, and the first question is like, does the software provide information within the scope of the IVD definition? So you go back a few slides of this presentation, you look at the definition, you're like, and then if it does not fall into that, well, then it's clear, then that your device is an MDR device. If yes, then you go to the second, where you then ask, like, is this the information that the software provides, is it more based on data obtained by an in vitro diagnostic medical device only? If yes, then it's clearly an IVD device falling under the IVDR. And if no, then you are in the actual tricky part, where the question is like, is the intended purpose of the device substantially driven by IVD data sources? If yes, then it falls under the IVDR, and if not, then no. So basically saying, like, as long as the data is mostly based on MDR data, it's most likely an MDR device. If it's completely based on IVDR data, then it's most likely an IVDR device. And if the medical device software mix and matches different inputs, like let's say lab tests and X-rays, then the question which one of that is like more substantial, so to say. And either based on that, you fall into the one or the other. and that you have to decide on a case by case, case by case. So that being said, let's continue with some examples. So I mean, let's just go through them, like DTX, like digital therapeutics. So basically, typically a mobile app that patients you typically use for a certain type of chronic or behavioral health issues. And let's say like a digital therapeutic app uses a CGM, like a continuous glucose monitor. I mean, either for diabetes treatment itself, but there are also like some apps now that you can use to improve your migraine, for example. And so in this case, it's using data from a CGM. So does it fall under MDR or IVDR? Well, first the main data comes from a CGM. So you would look at like what regulation does this fall under? And since a CGM is worn on the body, it is a normal medical device, so it's an MDR. So data comes from an MDR device. So this app would also be MDR. Coming to the next one, which is fairly overlapping, but quite different. Like if you have digital therapeutics, so maybe the same one that you used to support your diabetes treatment in the previous one, but instead of a continuous glucose monitor, you're now using a lab glucose or HbA1c measurement or test, which falls under the IVDR. Well, then the app is an IVDR device. But if you then, for example, have an app that uses both, so like let's say you use the CGM on an ongoing basis, but then once a quarter or so you do an HbA1c test and incorporate that, well, then you have the question like, is it substantially driven by the IVD data, or is it still mostly based on the CGM to make its treatment recommendations? So that you have to look at what it's mostly based on to decide whether falling under MDR or IVDR. So then the one that we have here under point 3, and software as a medical device analyzing blood-based spectrograms to screen for certain diseases. That would most likely be an IVDR if it does nothing else. But other than that, like let's say you draw blood from a patient, you put typically you take the serum or plasma of that, so you centrifuge it first and then put that in a spectrogram, get the get the spectrograms out of that, would have that as input for the software medical device. So you have in vitro data because it's taken from the blood, which is a specimen outside of the human body, which was analyzed in the spectrogram. And then this data, so to say, counts as in vitro data and going into the software medical device. So the software medical device would fall under the IVDR in this case. While in the other case, the fourth example here, if the software medical device analyzes CT or MRI scans, or any other data that comes from a MDR medical device, well, I mean, I guess you get it's obvious by now. This would then the SAMD would be also kind of an MDR device. Now we have a combination one again. Like what if you use lab tests and a CT scan together? Well, then again, the question is like which one of them is more in kind of contributing more to the outcome of the SAMD. Like if the lab test has like a significant contribution and then typically more than the other one, then it would count as an IVDR, while if not, it would be an MDR device in this case. So as you see, like it really depends. Like, I mean, obviously for medical device, it always depends on the intended purpose, but here you'd have to look at even closer, like if the device processes different kinds of data, especially if they come from in vitro as well as non-in vitro devices, and then basically decide which one has a significant contribution, and based on that make a decision which one to fall under. I mean, in the end, like they are not terribly hugely different. I mean, they're still based both on the same framework overall, but they are I mean, it's always devil is in the details. So you want to know which one to fall under from the very beginning, because also you'll reach out to a notified body fairly early in the process. And I mean, you first of all need to know which notified body you can reach out to. And then even if you reach out to one that can do both, like it's like a completely different process or conformity assessment procedure within them. So you can't just say like, oh, just kidding, we changed our mind, we want to do IVDR now. Like you need to know that from the very beginning. So you need to make an informed decision early on about that. Okay, so now coming to discussion and Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Pascal. That was very informative, really helping us understand where your device falls, if it's MDR or IVDR. And there's obviously a lot of overlap between the two. So I guess one of the first questions I wanted to ask is in terms of who is the final decision maker in kind of deciding if it's an MDR or an IVDR? Is that going to be the notified bodies, or how is the company going to deal with deciding, is it MDR, is it IVDR, and then sort of confirming that and moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, good question. So I mean, typically first you want to make a very informed decision yourself within the company, but in the end, I mean, you have the notified body that you work with, and then it's part of that initial, setting up the contract, them screening your application and deciding whether to accept it or not. I mean, they'll have a look and so to say, like, I mean, they'll make the decision whether they accept it under the IVDR or under the MDR. So the proposal is with you. You don't want to leave it up to them. I mean, they would also not accept that, but the decision, of course, in the end is with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you have to be aligned. So we've got one question in the chat, which I'll actually get to. So they're asking, is this the same case with patient flow applications in hospitals, like bed management systems, or are they regulated differently? So I don't know if you can see that question in the chat.
Yeah, I see that. So yeah, I mean, I haven't worked on them myself, so I can't exactly say. Actually, some I did. But it can definitely work. Definitely fall under the MDR. So the question is like, is it a medical device? That would be the very first question. And then as a second step, you would then look at, is it in IVD or not? I mean, if it's a patient flow that, I mean, there's no specimen that was taken away from the patient for that. Like for bed management systems like that, I mean, that would, like, let's say if there is a clinical benefit to the patient, I mean, that's one of the characteristics of a medical device, and it would likely be a medical device, like let's say an individual benefit to the patient. If it's bed management system where it's mostly about managing capacities and basically making sure to have the right amount of beds and have available and so on, that would then probably not even be a medical device at all, because it's not for the benefit of an individual patient, but more like administrational tool for managing the hospital. But if, let's say, you would have like a plugin in there to ensure that it is sterilized or cleaned properly, or managing a kind of a medication pump on the hospital bed or something, that would then be more like towards medical device. But yeah, one of the things would be, is there like an individual benefit or benefit for individual patients versus like the management of overall administrational overhead of the hospital?
Yeah, so I guess
does it answer the question in this case?
Yeah, I guess just going through your checklist and starting from the top and answering all those questions in the flow chart can help you get a better idea.
But maybe on this one small. But the flow chart we looked at was really just to differentiate between MDR and IVDR. Before that, you first of all have to decide, is it a medical device at all, for which that MECG guidance has another one. Has another flow chart as well, where you with like, I think 6 steps, where then this kind of benefit for individual patients is like one of them, and there are like a handful of others to decide, is it a medical device that you have or not? So like, I mean, not any, I mean, sometimes there's a kind of the assumption that any software that is used for the, in a hospital must be a medical device because it's for the benefit of patients in some ways. But I mean, it's not necessarily the case. Like, I mean, typical normal hospital management systems, information systems that are just storing data, visualizing them, organizing them, are typically not medical devices, but then only like those that add certain intelligence to analyze data, to propose recommendations or next steps for diagnostic or therapeutic purposes. Like that is then more getting towards medical devices, but as long as like more administration or managing data on a more general level, it's typically not.
Yeah, thanks. And then perhaps a question on understanding if in specific cases where maybe, for example, a platform diagnostics system where, you would have a separate device and then individual, perhaps single-use cartridges that would fall under IVDR, and then the device would be under an MDR. Are there scenarios like this that can exist? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like once you have like somewhat more complex devices, like it's a common approach to like more split them into like components or individual products that then work in conjunction. So like, I mean, in that specific example, I mean, it would be quite interesting to see like what it does. And again, like you would ideally have an intended purpose already defined when you go into a project like that, or would do that as a first step to understand what is it used for, what clinical benefit is it used for, but also like what data does it use? Because like, yeah, if you have cartridges that are being used to analyze blood or other specimen, I mean, they are with a 99.9 chance an IVDR. But then if you have a software then that subsequently analyzes those data, well, as we looked into earlier, probably an IVDR as well. But if it then also incorporating other data sources, for example, then it may fall more generally under the MDR. So depending on like what is the more predominant contribution to the outcome of the software again.
Yeah, and I guess it's always coming back to the importance of the intended use and defining the intended use of your device, which we touched on in the first session on regulatory product development. So yeah, that's extremely interesting.
Yeah, and that is like the part where more agile working and medical device regulatory work kind of clash from time to time, because yeah, I mean, in a more, yeah, you may say modern software development world, people just, yeah, I mean, when you start out, you don't necessarily know exactly what product you're developing, because you first need to find some product market fit and all of that. So you may iterate on the intended use as well. But the issue is just like, even small changes in intended use or purpose can have quite a significant change on your regulatory requirements. So meaning the more iteration on product market fit you can do before actually going into some kind of formal product development, the better, because like all the, like, let's say interviews or using wireframes or mockups to talk to stakeholders, clinicians, and so nurses and so on. I mean, those are cheap to produce, right? I mean, that way you can just find out what you need, what do you have demand for, and so on. And because I mean, you can still change things later on, but it just becomes more expensive. Like once you settled on your intended purpose and you then started working with a notified body, and you have you create your specifications and all of that. Like, I mean, the further down that route you are, the more things are set in stone. I mean, not completely fixed in stone. You can start with a new stone, so to say, but you just don't want to change things later on too much. And one thing to keep in mind here is like the higher the risk class, the more set in stone things will be. Like, let's say that example where you use spectrogram data to then predict, for example, whether someone has cancer or not. Like that, I mean, you won't just change the intended purpose to include something else. Like you decide on this product and then you develop it, and like making any change basically means you start from scratch. While if you do, like, let's say like a +1 MDR, digital therapeutic, I mean, which works in at least some of the states in Germany, there you're still a little more flexible. I mean, do you want to add another function to the app? Sure. Like, I mean, that's typically working out, but that mostly because it's a low risk class. There is not a lot of overlap or between the different functions. So meaning the higher the risk class, the more strict things are typically.
Yeah. And this is going to dictate all of your technical, clinical, and performance evaluations that you're doing. So great. Well, we're slowly getting to the end of this session. So I'd just like to ask if there's any more questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we'll quickly get to them. But otherwise, I'd like to thank you for your time today and for staying on with us. And do follow us on LinkedIn if you want to stay in touch about any future events. Feel free to suggest any topics that you'd like us to address. And with that, thank you very much, Pascal, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.